We'll get started. This is the Oregon quilt documentation at the Willamette Heritage Center, and we're documenting a quilt that belonged to Joan, who donated it to the center in 2013. I'm Mary Bywater Cross. I'm a quilt historian and a quilt artist and a consultant, and we have Eileen Fitzsimons, who's also a historian in many fields and is particular interest in quilts today, and then Renee Miller, who is our documentation person, and she'll be recording the information, and what will happen is she'll lead us through the form that we use by asking the questions, and then Eileen and I will confer and respond, and then Renee will write this down. And what happens after that is that the center will get a copy of it for their records, and a record of it will go to the Quilt Index at Michigan State University, where there have been over 50,000 quilts recorded and available to view online. And what will happen is, for future quilt historians or quilt enthusiasts, they can go online and look for red and green applique quilts and see what comes up, or red and blue applique quilts and see what comes up, and then compare what may be in other parts of the country that have been recorded in that project. The Oregon Quilt purpose of the Oregon Quilt Project is to document information about the quilts, and by that we mean recording. We read the quilt and we record the information that we see, and this is done for the quilts. We also talk to the quilt owner, who originally was Joan before she donated it, to get as much information as we can. We are doing this to preserve this information for future generations, to provide opportunities to further appreciation of quilts, and to educate the public through exhibition, or in this case, the plan, Kylie says, is for the quilt to be part of their study collection. And then also to encourage the tradition of quilt making, in which Willamette Heritage is doing a great job. We're working today with these records that have been found here, and we're fortunate to have Joan come along and be a part of this session. So if we can get started with Renee reading us the question, we will work from the outline, the whole quilt, and then zero in on details of the quilt to focus on the colors and on the thread that has been used, and on the details that are in the construction of the quilt.
All right, ladies, get your measuring tape. This is a full quilt, yes?
Yes. Yes.
So its size and its overall width.
So we measure 3 places, because not every old quilt is perfectly square, either when it was made or over time. If it's washed, it can be shrinking. So there's 68. We measure 3 places. That's 67 and a half. And 68 and a fourth.
I'm going to go for 68.
68.
Uh-huh.
And a quarter.
Yeah. That's the width.
Yes.
Length.
So we've got 86 and a half. 87 and a half. And 87.
87?
Yeah, 87.
And then the block size.
Okay, let's see. Where is the seam?
It's like
Here,
17 and 7/8.
Is it square?
This is 17 by 17 and 7/8. I'll call it 17. Let's move it back this way for a second. So it's 17 by 17 and a half. So we ought to check another block just to see if it's just this one in the center. That's just under at 17 and a half, almost. It was probably
what she was after.
Yeah. That's almost 18.
No, that's 17 3/4.
Okay, so we would just call it 17 inches square.
Probably.
Yeah,
17 or 17 and a half inches
either of
square.
those. So let's go with 17 and a half because they are a little bit bigger.
And looking at the quilt, there are 2 blocks that are done with the 4 tulips, and they're in the very center of the quilt, and then outer the 2 side pieces or strips or blocks there are 3 applique blocks with only 3 tulips and a stem. And they're reading from either side of the quilt. And then at the outside, she's filled her corners with
Buds.
probably a tulip bud.
An unopened tulip. And then there's these little single ones too.
Right.
So you've got 3 motifs. You've got the crossed tulip, you've got the single stem tulip with 3 flowers, you've got the single tulip, and then you have the buds, and then this swag has little buds in it also.
And there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of the single tulip blossom. Yeah, this one.
Okay.
What would you call the pattern name?
It's a tulip variation. I spent quite a bit of time looking it up last night in the books, and this would be an original design, possibly original to the maker, or she may have seen a quilt and reproduced it. Applique quilts are traditionally representational, where piece quilts are much more geometric, and a printed pattern or set template would be used.
Do you want to show one of that? On the reference
Yes.
book?
Yeah, I'm going to look up the BB number, or well, it wouldn't have one, right, because it's an original.
It does not have a Brackman number. And for our documentation, we brought Barbara Brackman's books. She's the authority that is the common one to be used in all quilt documentation projects. Her Encyclopedia of Piece Quilt Patterns, also her Encyclopedia of Applique is quite helpful, but this predates the things that are in Barbara's books.
But these are some of the reference books we use to kind of codify the numbers. So if we come up with a quilt number using this number system, it will match one made in Tennessee, the same pattern and the same number. So it's a way when it's uploaded in the computer system, there's consistency in the numbering systems.
Sashing? Not really. Well, border.
There's no sashing. The blocks are block to block in placement.
So could you explain what sashing is for folks that may not know? What would you be looking for if there was sashing?
A strip of fabric that would be connecting the blocks, separating the blocks, and it would run the length of the center of the applique.
It makes, if you use a contrasting fabric, it gives you a grid. So the blocks appear to be set within a grid, either of similar fabric or contrasting fabric.
And at this period of quilt, sashing wasn't used that much because the beds were narrower.
Okay, so the border, I see 3 sides?
Yes. Well, there are a
Well,
border
those
on
separate.
4 sides.
Yeah. So here's the border, and the borders are, I suppose we should kind of look and see. Do you have?
They want the width.
They want the width of the border. Okay. So we'll check these. Do that one. Okay. So 7 3/4.
7/8.
Okay. So the borders are 7 3/4 inches wide.
Except, Eileen, for the 4th border over here.
Which is different.
3 of the borders are the same. A swag border with a bud often, but not always. The buds are on one side.
This is just a plain swag with no buds.
Right. And this 4th border is actually
Wider.
it's wider. It's about 12.5 inches.
Okay. And it has a very different motif from the other ones. It's a kind of stalks of buds, and then this very geometric zigzag.
Okay, so now the layout format. They're asking for a one patch, a whole cloth, what would you call it, medallion?
Keep going.
These were the belts that came.
Crazy quilt, horizontal strips, on point. It's non-traditional or an art quilt.
It's on point.
On point.
Which means instead of the blocks being square to the edge, they're turned so this is called
Right.
on point.
Vertical strips, pictorial alternating blocks.
Is there one for block to block?
There is not.
Okay.
Should I say other and right block to block?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
The shape of the edge.
Straight.
Rounded.
Oh, this, yeah. Oh, the corners. You mean?
So, but you couldn't.
You said the shape of the edge.
Shape of the edge.
The edge of the quilt. It's straight, but then there's kind of rounded here.
Okay.
Rounded corners. And then they're asking for predominant colors.
White, red,
Blue.
Is that blue?
blue. It's a Prussian blue.
Okay.
It's a,
We're going to get down to, are they quilt specific colors? Which is that the turkey red? And so Prussian blue.
What does the specific mean?
Well, it says quilt specific colors, and then it gives you quite a
Oh.
few choices. Predominant colors of the quilt is above that.
Right.
So,
Okay, so yes, it's Prussian blue
mhm.
and it's red.
Do you want red? They have madder red and turkey red.
Turkey red.
turkey.
How can you tell the difference between madder and turkey red? What do you look for?
Madder is a little more rust, and the detail of the bud is turkey red fabric. And this is one of the things that's unique about the quilt is that it has just these small amounts of the turkey red. And turkey red was the most expensive fabric available, imported from England and used sparingly, as say in this quilt. You kept your turkey red scraps because they were so costly. I'm sorry, I can't remember exactly what the price was per yard, but it involved a number of processes to create it.
Create the color.
Yeah.
And madder red is made with plant dyes, so it's paler and it may not be as stable if you wash the quilt. It may fade over time to a reddy pink. So madder would be a natural dye, and turkey red would be one that was made through a complex dyeing process commercially.
So what would you say its overall color value is? Lights or pastels, darks, one color, bright colors, multicolor, two color, or primary colors?
Two color.
Okay. Is there any damage?
Well, there's some fading.
I mean,
Is there any discoloration, or have the dyes run?
no, the dyes have not run. There is some browning, but that may
Would that
be
be staining, do you think?
or over time with storage, perhaps in
Possibly.
up against wood or something like that, which you don't want to ever leave a quilt touching wood of any kind, because the wood, especially in the cedar chest, can discolor fabric over time. So
would you call that discoloration or staining?
let's look and see. It's not water stain, so I would say discoloration. And it's
Okay.
not a stain that comes through like water damage, like if something's has a stain, like you spilled a cup of coffee or something on it and it went all the way through.
How about distortion or shrinkage?
What are our choices there?
I'm reading them down, that's that one. Fold marks or creases.
Fold marks.
Full marks.
Mildew.
No mildew.
Okay. Any pencil, pen, crayon, or marker damage?
No.
Don't see any.
So then stains or soiled, but we called it discoloration, so no stain.
Yeah.
Except for, there is a little, see this green in there? Right here.
Oh,
I noticed.
that looks almost like ink or something that's gotten on there. It's not next to the, there's a little bit of blue on here, but it's not adjacent to any of the blue fabric, so it's not fabric color that's run into the white background fabric. So it looks just like maybe a little bit of blue ink got on there at some point. Not ballpoint ink, I'd say India type ink.
Mm-hmm. Is there any disintegration of the fabric?
No.
No.
Any insect damage that you see?
No.
No.
Okay. Tears or holes or open seams?
No. I don't see any.
No.
It's actually,
And wear to the edge or the binding? Actually, it looks
Not
pretty
really.
good.
No,
It's in amazing shape.
yeah, probably was saved as a good quilt.
So what would you rate its overall condition? Excellent, very good, good, fair, or poor?
Very good.
Very good or good?
Very good.
Very good says almost new, good says moderate use.
Oh, let's say good.
Right.
I don't think it's been used a lot because
No,
there's
it's
no
just a
fraying,
little-
but the surface staining
Yeah.
shows that it's had some
Right.
exposure to use anyway.
Could that be clean side?
What do you think would be
bother?
better?
Okay. All right. So what is the date associated with the quilt? What does the family believe the date of the quilt is?
Well, after speaking to you, I would guess it would be probably before 1850. If it came across with them. I can't think of anyone else other than maybe my grandmother had a friend who gave it, but I'm now thinking if it came with my grandmother's family across, they got here in 1850 to the mission.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I don't know, the more I think about it, the more I think that may just be where it came from.
Did they come, you mentioned the mission, and that would be the Whitman mission up by Walla Walla. Did they come before the Whitmans were massacred? Do you know?
Yes, see, that was the massacre was where my grandmother was taken, great-grandmother, was taken captive.
Okay.
And her brother stayed with her at the mission, and the family had gone on to go to Portland.
Mhm.
And he was killed, the brother was killed there. And she was taken captive. And it took them months to get the group that was taken captive back again. I was trying to think of the man from that got them freed. Took a lot of materials and stuff to the Indians to get them ransomed back, and Chief Five Crows didn't want her to go. He wanted her for his wife, and so I wish I could say his name, who took the information. He spent more or gave more to the Indians for her than for all the rest. And he finally got her back.
It's interesting to have you say that, and that's the value of having a donor be available to an institution like this who has that information. And those are the kinds of leads that you've given us, or you've mentioned, that we can then validate through research and find out exactly the name of that person and if there are any other records about the man going and rescuing her.
Well, there's a book written about her and all of that.
Do you know the title of the book about her?
I can't remember what it is. It's just primarily because it was written by one of her children's children.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a copy. My mother was she was the oldest living relative, and she was the first. He numbered when he gave the books out. He numbered them, and she was number one.
Wow.
But I have one as well, and I don't know. I never thought about it being from that side before, but it almost makes more sense.
If you have multiple copies, you might check with the Willamette Heritage Center and see if they have a copy of that book.
Okay.
And then maybe make it a donation too, so that it could be placed with the quilt. We're saying 1850. This is another of Barbara Brackman's books, America's Printed Fabric, 1770 to 1890. And one of the sections is on turkey red. And you see, comparing the fabric that we have in the quilt, here's the same colors being used in this turkey red fabric. So we would say this was not produced very long, and we would say 1850 is a good date, and we could go 10 or 20 years either side.
Is this one, Eileen's is
Yes.
pre-1830, so it could be even older.
It could be even older.
This is another resource that we use a lot in documenting quilt fabrics and dating them, called Dating Fabrics. There's 2 volumes by Eileen Tristane, and she's done a really good job of the color resolution in these samples so that you can put them up against an old sample of fabric and do a determination by maybe the time period when the cloth was manufactured. So there's another 2-volume set that we use. This one is 1800 to 1960, and then the second volume is in 1960 to 2000. So these are really basic books when you're documenting quilts for quick reference on fabrics and colors. Using the fabrics to date this quilt is really difficult because solid colors are really hard to date and identify. They were used all the way through the making of quilts. So here we are with the red, solid red and the solid blue. And yet in the Brackman book, she makes this statement: Prussian blue is a mineral dye that colors cotton a variety of shades, the most distinctive being a bright royal blue. Unlike indigo, which works most efficiently as a background color, Prussian blue can be the figure in a print as well as in a ground. And we have it here in what would be the ground. Next question.
All right. So you get to choose a date frame. So your choice is 1800 to 1849. Then the next one is 1850 to 1875. Would you take the?
I almost put it earlier just
I
because
think
if
it
you
would have to be
look
early.
at this
Right.
says pre-1830. So
Let's do that.
I'd check.
1800, 1849.
Yeah.
All right.
Plus the history from the family also puts it in that time period.
Right. Okay. And then they want the inscriptions, which.
Okay, this quilt, we're lucky enough to have embroidered initials. I'm holding it upside down, but it's an S and a B, as in boy. So we do have, hopefully, the maker's name, initials. We're not sure, but
Can you tell what kind of stitches those are?
it looks like a chain stitch. It's not just a running stitch. And it's embroidery. It's like a couple of strands of cotton or embroidery floss.
Good. Next.
Okay. We're looking for the materials and construction of the fibers in the top. Cotton, I'm assuming?
Cotton.
All cotton, nothing else?
Yeah, no polyester in 1840.
No silk.
No silk. No.
Okay, fabric types: broadcloth, chintz, glazed, muslin, satin, flannel, bead sack, handwoven, sateen, velvet.
Muslin. And broadcloth.
Right.
So muslin would be the background, the creepy color, and then the broadcloth would be the tulips would be broadcloth.
And fabric patterns or prints and styles used are there no batiks, of course. Cheater fabrics.
Solid, no, the solid
solids.
color and the turkey red, and then there is a butterscotch print, or cheddar print. Actually,
Cheddar, like cheddar cheese, colored yellow, a little bit here in the tulip, and then there's a multicolored, it's a red print, a red background print with a little multicolored flower print.
that's the turkey red.
Yeah, it's turkey red, but it's also a little bit of print. So it's solid color fabric except for just the little bits in the tulips and the buds.
Would you say it's hand pieced?
And applique.
That is not a choice. They have hand piecing, strip piecing, English template piecing, foundation piecing, and machine piecing.
Well, it's hand piece. This is all.
And then applique, technique.
Okay, the blocks are hand stitched together, and it's applique.
And applique. Is there any novelty techniques? No biscuits, nothing like that?
No.
No.
Nothing. Any embellishment? No.
No.
The quilting techniques used, it's
Hand quilted.
Mm-hmm.
number of stitches per inch.
This is where this comes in. Right. So.
And what do you think the thread type is while you're
Probably cotton.
Probably cotton.
So what we're going to do is we'll see how many, in an inch, how many stitches appear on the top of the quilt, and that will tell us how many stitches per inch in the quilting. So.
And what is it that you guys know about stitches per inch before the Civil War and after?
Are you asking a question off the form?
No, I'm asking a question because I know you know and it's helpful.
And you started reading off the form. So 1, 2,
Pre-Civil War is way better
5,
quilting
6, 7, 8. I'd say
than after.
8.
There's extensive quilting.
Yes.
Is there a question about?
It does ask about the pattern design.
I say 8 stitches per inch.
Okay. Is it dense? Yes.
Yes.
What's the width between the quilting?
Right. 1/4 inch maybe. Some places, I'd say 1/2 inch. Yeah.
Is it all quilted with oh no, they have matching thread. Is it the thread color?
Yes, it's cream,
It's all
or the
cream.
same color as the muslin.
Now, an interesting point about this is that this side of the quilt has this echo quilting on the applique,
right, it's
coming out
quilted
from the
differently.
applique, but it is not on the other side.
Yeah, I see that.
This side of the quilt, it has what would be a background fill, and they're kind of interlocking circles.
And same thing here.
And I can't tell you the name of what that design is, but it's a very traditional pattern for background quilting in this.
The curve?
No, meaning these circles.
Oh, yeah, it's like a, not snowball or round pater.
I think there's a
It's like
third
orange
type over
peel.
here,
It's
too.
like an orange peel quilt block shape.
Right. And then in the border, there's a different quilting pattern. There are hearts.
Yeah, hang on because that's on a different spot.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they want the, is there visible knots?
Yeah, they're not on the surface. I don't see
No,
knots on the
no.
surface.
So what would you say, that doesn't really have an overall pattern design, does it? The choices are all over design, clamshell, echo, which it does have on part, double parallel lines, single parallel lines, triple parallel lines, a crosshatch, diamonds, square, in the ditch, an elbow or a fan, an outline. So
Well,
this-
there's definitely, this would be elbow or fan quilting.
Right.
But then there's also this kind of orange peel pattern. And then you said there's hearts over there. And this is leaves. This is quilted leaves. This is a totally different pattern on this side.
And small circles, stems with small circles and double hearts on one border.
So it's just, there's a huge variety of quilting in this, which is kind of interesting.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe she got tired of doing one kind.
It's possible that it was more than one person, and a way to do that, one check is to count the stitches on different places on the quilt. And this comes from the Bewley family, that we know there were a number of daughters in the family and probably a number of aunts or related to the owner or to the maker. So it could very well have been a shared project.
Would it not have seemed more logical that the material, especially the colors, came from before they came across the line?
Oh, definitely.
Oh, yes.
That's
Yeah.
what I think.
Yeah.
So it would be way before.
Do you know where they came from?
I have it it's in the book.
Okay.
So, but
Was
I
it the
haven't
Midwest or
read
the
it.
South or New England?
No, it was more middle of the country.
Midwest,
so
maybe.
Maybe a little bit further.
Ohio,
East.
Indiana.
Yeah, somewhere in
The
there.
turkey red fabric came in.
Her husband, if it was her who did it, her husband was the captain of the train.
The turkey red fabric was imported into Baltimore and possibly Philadelphia. And there was definitely a traveling route between Philadelphia and Ohio and on into the Midwest.
The Oregon Trails.
Where they started, yeah. Great.
Can you tell if there's any background fill pattern?
Oh, yes.
Lots of
Lots of
background
background fill.
What they call it, they have a grid, crosshatch, stipple, meander, free motion, parallel lines.
Parallel lines, definitely.
Parallel lines on the fan, but then this other, do we have other choices for the background?
Just grid, crosshatch, stipple, meander, parallel lines, none, and other.
Other.
So-
Anything you can describe specifically?
We did.
Well, yeah, I was writing some of that.
You can just say, yeah.
Just-
Interlocking circles,
Yeah. Got that up there.
and then in the border, there are hearts and stems with berries.
With berries?
Mhm.
Oh, okay.
How do you differentiate between the quilting pattern and the background fill? What does that mean to you differently?
The quilting pattern generally relates to the applique or to the piece block, and the background fill is what is put in all the other spaces
In between.
to hold it down, hold it together.
Are there any marking lines?
No,
Oh, that's what's interesting.
What's the binding? Is it hand stitched? Is it bias?
it's not bias, and it's hand stitched.
Is the top brought to the back, or is it a knife edge finish?
The top's brought to the back, I think.
Yes,
I wouldn't think.
yes.
And split to the back.
Okay. Anything else? Let's see. Well, what's the width of the binding?
Oh, it's really narrow. It's like a quarter
There
of
was
an
no
inch.
kind of a filling in between at all. They just.
We haven't gotten to that yet.
The batting.
Quarter inch.
Okay.
It's just two pieces.
But we haven't looked yet.
Yeah, that's the next question about the
Oh.
batting.
No, take
It's
my glove off.
what material of the, it's gotta be cotton, right? Or, and it says unknown, your choices are cotton, a cotton polyester, a polyester
Come here and feel
wool,
this.
a blanket or flannel.
Flannel in there. And if you're on this corner, we don't usually handle quilts without gloves, but this corner, some of the stitching has worn away.
Yeah, this is a
And
little
so
loose
we're
here,
trying
too.
to pull this apart and feel if there's any batting in there, because there are no holes. That's one advantage to having a little damage to a quilt to the top or the back. You can get in and see the batting. So on a quilt this old, it's very difficult to tell if there's, I think maybe there isn't.
I think there was a bat. You can see, if we hold it up to the light,
Some lumps.
you can see where through the washing and the use, the batting has congealed around the stitch lines. And so there was a bat, and that would probably have been a cotton bat.
Very thin one, very thin cotton bat.
Can I make a comment about the borders?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. there are two different borders on the quilt, as you can see. And traditionally, you would have borders on all four sides, or maybe on three sides. And if it were three sides, then the quilt was made to be used on a bed, which was against a wall, or where they didn't need a fourth border. This one has this fourth border that's wider than the others, and this may have been a piece that was done for another quilt, because it has a different design, or vice versa. This border, the swags, may have been done for a different quilt and then incorporated into this one. Because the wider border does emulate the applique pattern more than the swag border does.
Okay, now they'd like you to flip it to the back.
Oh, okay. And then we'll walk it this way. Oh, now you can really see the quilting patterns really show up well. Okay.
I know I'm supposed to be having mine, but we'll do it some other time.
We're just about finished, aren't we?
Oh, you have to get yours done.
That's okay.
Okay.
So what are the fibers in the back?
Cotton.
Cotton,
Predominant color, cream.
cream.
How many pieces?
There are two wide pieces, and then a narrow one. There are four pieces in the quilt, two wide pieces and two narrow ones on two sides.
So are you doing the narrow first or the wide?
The wide.
Okay.
It goes 32 and a half.
32 and a half.
Let's check the other one. No, 32 and a half. 32 and a half.
Okay.
Which was the common fabric size at that time.
And then there's this one, which is 2.5, and one strip. Is there another one over there?
No, there
one.
isn't.
Then there's a little 2.5 inch strip on just this one edge.
And then there's another strip at the top.
Okay. This is about 5 1/4. Not 5. Let's say 5 1/2 at the top.
And it's hand sewn, machine sewn.
Hand.
That's for the figures. The source of materials. What'd you say?
Unknown.
Unknown.
The pattern source. Quilt top pattern source.
Unknown.
Unknown. The quilt design pattern source. And that's it for the paperwork. The rest is pictures.
Okay.
Yeah,
I brought an additional image from the same period of time that was a quilt that in my book called Quilts of the Oregon Trail. There was a similar one done by a very early pioneer into Oregon. It's a tulip variation, and this is what it looks like. Again, it has the border on three sides. It has this very original tulip, but it's similar to the tulip that is in the quilt. Now, what can we say that's significant about this quilt for use as educational or as part of the collection?
Well, certainly its age, that is so early in Oregon history, and that there is family documentation as to who made it, the story of probably the person who brought it. I mean, would you say this probably came over the Oregon Trail? It was not made here.
This was not made here.
Yeah.
It's too detailed in its workmanship to be something that was made here. Usually pioneers during their first 2 to 5 years after arriving were busy establishing their home and their farm and not spending time making quilts. They didn't have time to spend making quilts.
And this obviously
was not one that was made for warmth instantly on the Oregon frontier. This is something that was probably brought from home and was valued because it's not worn. It may have been put on a bed at special times of the year and then packed away, which is why you would have the stains, and not from wear, but just from the way it was stored. So it's not worn or shredded and then holes. So this was a really special quilt that came out from home.
And this would be the kind of quilt that would be an heirloom, kept for generations, as this quilt was before Joan did the perfect thing by donating it to an institution who will now keep it for future generations and use it to enhance their role in the community as a keeper and preserver of Oregon history.
So the last thing we'll do, we probably won't show you, but we'll take, it's already been photographed for the museum, so we don't need to take another photograph, but then we would go out, clamp it onto a big frame and take a couple of pictures of it and probably some details of the stitching for the Quilt Index in Michigan. So, I don't know if there's anything else.
I think that concludes it, and what we'd say is that if you're interested in having a quilt documented or get in touch with us, you may contact us through the Willamette Heritage Center in Salem, or you may contact the Oregon Quilt Project. Both our resources are online. Thank you. Thank you, Eileen.
You're welcome.
And thank you, Joan.
Yeah, it was great to have you here.